Welcome guys to another Fights.io video. Today we'll be taking a look at every Fights.io weapon throughout the 5 years, almost 5 years of Fights.io. Leon has given us many weapons to choose from, with each weapon having their own style. I roughly ordered this list of weapons from most commonly used to least common. So stick around to the end to check out the rarest weapon that is used. If you like these more informative types of videos, then please do like the video. And without further ado, let's start with the first one. First up is the Crossbow. Debatably the most commonly used weapon in the game. The main reason this weapon was so and still is popular is for its precise but deadly shots and for its high range. Whenever a team is formed in-game, you will almost always see a crossbow player within that team. Many players consider this weapon to be the quote-unquote pro weapon because they believe those who use the crossbow well are considered pros for their display of accuracy, because really, every shot counts when using crossbow. The most popular Fights.io YouTuber, Warner, used this weapon most of the time, demonstrating how deadly it is when used correctly, and giving it screen time for thousands of players. To this day, it is still used frequently. However, one of its weaknesses is its low health, which makes crossbow users rather brittle, which is why you will usually see them thrive if they're on a team, unless the crossbow user is skilled, which is quite rare. Many styles came from this weapon, which have varying popularity. The most popular is the shimmering technique before flicking a shot, which was popularized or theorized to be popular because of Mr. Pillman, though it is still up to debate, but he has popularized that technique. The second is the Trumpet. This weapon is extremely popular with new players. The weapon shoots from all sides, which makes up for the new player's lack of experience, really. Since aiming is not really an issue for this weapon, players only have to dodge haphazardly to win against other weapons. Their main weakness is their range, so other players usually will shoot backwards at Trumpet. More experienced players don't use this weapon as much, since it is a display of incompetence in their eyes, and in my eyes as well. However, some notable names from this weapon are still seen with varying levels of recognition, such as El Rey and Mr. Spy, a YouTuber from 2018. But yes, overall, Trumpet is very popular just for being such an easy weapon to quote-unquote be good at, because it's just an unfair weapon. But yeah. Third up is the dart gun. This weapon is also rather popular for skilled players for its precise shots, though in general, the slower and more precise a weapon is, the more people will believe it to be a pro weapon, quote unquote. The dart gun has the same health and less range as the crossbow, but packs a bigger punch with more damage. The shot could also scatter into smaller shots, so it was easier to hit even when missing the opponent. This weapon was brittle, but in the hands of a master, it could be deadly. Some masters of the game, such as Bot and STA Ninja, use this weapon. Fourth will be the Orb. This weapon is also commonly used for newer players. Generation of shots. It has a great advantage to not have to reload. However, it would most of the time get destroyed by any weapon by not doing enough damage, so it is not as common. It's so restricted to new players that there aren't really any notable names who use it that I'm aware of, but you may write some in the comments if you do. 5th is Claws. This weapon is dealing lots of damage while having low health. A moderate amount of players use this weapon for its always surprising damage. However, its range isn't much to be desired, but in the hands of a skilled player, the range can be breached with dodging of the opponent's shots, and when close, most often than not, it's basically game over. Some prominent users of this weapon are Acro and Hypernova. Next up is Scythe, a somewhat rarely seen weapon that honestly could use a small nerf. This weapon is very strong and doesn't take a lot of experience to realize why. It has long range, high damage, and its shots are spread out and it's fast. Overall, not used very much, but is usually used as a secondary weapon for many players to counter other weapons they can't beat. Big names who use this weapon are Lol Smiley Face and the Holy Flame. 7th is my personal favorite and main, Staff. This weapon is rarely used, sadly. Many, however, respect its strength, being rather bulky while doing decent damage and have spread. There is a style to stick with Staff, which is hard to explain, so I won't really explain it. Many will usually also use this weapon as a secondary weapon, but there are still many who main Staff, such as myself, Dreadlord, Dread Assassin, etc. The list goes on. Next up is Cards, a somewhat rarely seen weapon being used. It is practically a better version of the Crossbow, with it having more damage, more health, and less precise, with its only drawback being slightly slower than Crossbow. It also might need a small nerf. The only reason this weapon is so unused is probably because of the Crossbow's overwhelming popularity. Skilled and new players alike rarely use this weapon. However, there are well-versed card users, such as pros like Terraria and Dread Burnsy. Ninth is Axe, an extremely bulky weapon with a lot of damage to back up. Also has almost no counters other than swords, which we'll be covering late. Being so rarely used, it always surprises people to see how effective it is. Even so, masters such as Dreadlord and Landroth use this weapon. 10th is Shuriken. It's most likely the best secondary or most popular secondary crossbow user weapon for its very similar stats and way it's supposed to be used, through flicking. This basically is the crossbow with less health but faster shots. This weapon used to be supremely popular when Leon gave it a huge buff that made it unmatched in 2020. Big names that came out of this moment in history for Fights.io were the AF clan in general, with Kamikaze, and Angelica and Pillman, who like to use it as a secondary weapon. Next up is Wand. We'll briefly cover this. An understandably unused weapon that is just like Orb, but less popular. You usually see it be used by someone once, and they switch right after. It really is an unused weapon. 12th is Spear. Now, this weapon is pretty average, and not many people use this weapon, but when Not Watermelon used it, it was a completely different game. His style brought about a new interest in the weapon for over a month until it was found out that Claws completely cancels Not Watermelon's style. This weapon is rarely used now and tested out only by new players, but don't underestimate its potential. Speaking of potential, sword is probably one of the most underrated weapons. It's the most bulky weapon, and if used by a skilled player, it is almost unstoppable. Its only weakness really is ranged weapons. Flicking the sword quickly is what revolutionized it, but nobody seems to really realize it. People like Dreadlord, Simon, etc. notice this, and even they rarely use it. The only person to main this weapon was a player named Werewolf Ketson, and that really is it. 13th is Skull. This weapon is rather new and has the drawback of slowing down the player every shot, which makes this weapon hard to use against multiple people, but in a one-on-one, its long range and beefy nature make it a strong weapon. However, it is so rarely used because of its slowdown drawback. It's only really used when at a spawn. 14th will be Book. This is also a weapon that stops you, but this times completely stops you while you're shooting. At the very least, it has the range and health, but nobody uses this weapon, and to boot, this is also a very new weapon. Number 15 is Amulet. This weapon was looked at for a bit when it came out, not long ago, but now it's so unused that only a few new players try it once in a while. It has below average health and doesn't really stick out of the mold of all the other way better choices of weapons. Second to last is Dagger. Being probably the worst weapon, in my opinion, only a few skilled players have tried it out to see its worth. Its overall has bad health, range, and damage. However, if you keep putting on the pressure, it could do some damage. The only player I've seen use it well is Bot and Fragger Dagger, who mains the weapon, but nobody uses this weapon in general. And finally, the most unused weapon in all of Fights.io is Bow. This is also a weapon no pro really uses anymore, or ever used at all. The last time a pro really used it was Bloodhood in 2019 when rideables were a thing, and the only reason why he used it was because with the boosted stats that rideables gave, it made Bow really a viable weapon. It's just overall below average, and it is only touched by just a few players now. So there it is, all the Fights.io weapons so far. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and see ya. Bye.